You've got to have a lot of faith to be a Darwinist. You have to believe that, without intelligent intervention, number one, something arose from nothing, the origin of the universe. Number two, order arose from chaos, the design of the universe. Number three, life arose from non-life, which means that intelligence arose from non-intelligence, and personality arose from non-personality. Number four, new life forms arose from existing life forms despite evidence to the contrary, such as 1. Genetic limits, 2. Cyclical change, 3. Irreducible complexity, 4. Molecular isolation, 5. Non-viability of transitional forms, and 6. The fossil record. Okay, so the evidence is not good for macroevolution. But what about theistic macroevolution? Perhaps what can't be explained naturally makes good sense if you add God to the picture. Why suggest that? If there were evidence for God and for macroevolution, then there might be a reason to combine the two. But, as we have seen, there is no evidence that macroevolution has occurred. It's not like you have contradictory evidence, some evidence that points to macroevolution and other evidence that disproves it. If you had, say, a fossil record with millions of transitional forms on one hand, but irreducibly complex creatures on another, then perhaps you could suggest that God guided evolution through those unbridgeable gaps. But since that is not the case, it seems that God wasn't needed to guide macroevolution because there's no evidence macroevolution has occurred. Finally, let's look at the evidence with another question in mind. What would the evidence have to look like for creation, intelligent design, to be true? How about, number 1, a universe that has exploded into being out of nothing. Number 2, a universe with over 100 fine-tuned, life-enabling constants for this tiny, remote planet called Earth. Number 3, life that has been observed to arise only from existing life. It has never been observed to arise spontaneously. Consists of thousands and even millions of volumes of empirically detectable specified complexity, and is therefore more than just the non-living chemicals it contains. Changes cyclically and only within a limited range, cannot be built or modified gradually, irreducibly complex, is molecularly isolated between basic types, there's no ancestral progression at the molecular level, leaves a fossil record of fully formed creatures that appear suddenly, do not change, and then disappear suddenly. An honest look at the facts suggests creation, not macroevolution, is true. As we have seen, atheists have to work really hard not to conclude the obvious. That's why they need to have a lot more faith than we do. Finally, we have a proposal to help resolve the debate in this country over what should be taught in the public schools regarding creation and evolution. What would be wrong with teaching them what we've just covered in chapters 3 to 6? Notice we haven't been quoting Bible verses to make our points. We've been citing scientific evidence. So this isn't a battle of science versus religion. It's a battle of good science versus bad science. Right now, most of our children are being taught bad science because they're being taught evolution only. It doesn't have to be that way. What would be unconstitutional about teaching the surge evidence, showing them the complexity of the simplest life, making the distinctions between micro and macroevolution, and between forensic and empirical science, or exposing the problems with macroevolution? Nothing. So why do we continue to indoctrinate our children in a flawed and crumbling theory that is based more on philosophical presuppositions than on scientific observations? Why don't we give our children all the scientific evidence, pro and con, and let them make up their own minds? After all, shouldn't we be teaching them how to think critically on their own? Of course we should. But Darwinists will go to great lengths to ensure that that doesn't happen. Darwinists would rather suppress the evidence than allow it to be presented fairly. Why? Because this is the one area where Darwinists lack faith. They lack the faith to believe that their theory will still be believed after our children see all the evidence.